Welcome to another episode of This Catholic Life. Conversations about life's ups and downs, big and small, how we deal with every situation imaginable, whatever life throws at us, but still manage to be sensible, practical and joyful. Today's show is Catholic Tradies, a conversation about being a Catholic and a tradesman, and why there seem to be a few less tradesmen in the church these days. I'm your host, Peter Holmes, and today I'm joined by two guests, although it seems a bit of a stretch to call you guests because I've hung out with these guys enough over the years. We usually hang around in Marvel movies and having steak and beer, or vegetarian pizza in some cases.
It's always on a Friday.
Speaking of which, on my left is Jeremy Nunes, who's a carpenter, husband and father of a growing army. Hello, Jeremy.
Hi.
And on my right is Trent Prasser, also a carpenter, former teacher, now chippy, and husband and father. Welcome, Trent.
Thanks, Peter.
Good to have you guys on. Before we get started, just a reminder to the listener that if you like the show, you should subscribe on your podcast app, and that way you won't miss an episode. So, Catholic Tradies. What do we mean by a tradie? So maybe I'll throw to my left here. Jeremy, what's a tradie?
Well, a tradie is just what it says. It's a tradesman.
A tradesman. But what does that mean?
Someone who's done a trade.
Who's plying their trade, right? Has done or is doing?
Oh, yeah, you could be an apprentice.
Okay.
If you're an apprentice, you're called a tradie, right, Trent?
Yeah. So an apprentice is in. They're already in.
You're learning.
Kinda.
You're learning the trade,
yeah.
You generally go on a TAFE, or you've done a TAFE, you've done your trade.
Right.
You've done your time on site, and you've got a ticket behind you.
Right.
So, yeah, to be a tradesman, you've either got to be an apprentice or have a qualification of some sort.
Right. So you're basically an accredited person in that area.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And is there a kind of a mutual respect for other tradies, or is it just in your little trade? Or they're already laughing.
This is a hand grenade.
Who's listening to this?
This is a hand grenade. Are the Sparkies and the plumbers listening?
Oh, so there's a bit of rivalry in there.
Oh, there's definitely rivalry.
You could call it rivalry.
Yeah, and especially between carpenters and cabinet makers, right? You'd have some stories.
Yeah.
Right. So spin this out. So what's the difference between carpenter and a cabinet maker?
Oh, carpenters, I guess, are more in line with building.
Right.
Cabinet makers and joiners are more cabinet makers.
Like
a lot of the finer, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, see,
cool.
Trent's missing the point.
I was trying to be polite.
Yeah, no, there's no, mate, there's no, you know how it is, there's no politeness on site.
Go on.
So a cabinet maker would describe a carpenter's work to the nearest 50 millimetres.
Right.
So 50 millimetres is 5 centimetres. So they say that our work is within 5 centimetres and their work is within 1 millimetre.
Right.
So they say when they cut things in, it's cut in very finely with chisels and saws and know-how, and when we cut things in, we just cut it in with a chainsaw. So
chainsaws are fun, but
yeah, of course, to chop down trees.
I don't know how many houses would work if you were 5 centimetres out.
So this is part of the banter.
Rivalry, okay, yeah.
Banter and rivalry, it's all about banter.
All right, so let's say you've got people who are in this sort of friendly banter, let's call it, between a joiner and a carpenter. What about a sparky, like an electrician? Is that friendly banter, or is it?
I'd call it animosity rather than banter. But
Well, they cut holes where they want,
and leave their mess lying around.
and then
all the time.
someone has to come and
We have to come around and clean it up and
yeah,
patch it. Yeah.
and especially if they do it in the skirting or an architrave.
Yep.
Right. Well, even with that, now that you've, maybe I should have got an electrician on as well, but even with that, is there a kind of a mutual respect for that when you're all dealing with an architect? Whoa.
Now
That's a hand
we have
grenade.
to be careful.
That's a real hand grenade.
Because the hand grenade is that Peter's wife is a qualified architect.
She studied architecture.
She studied, yeah.
She's- See, her father was a builder, by the way.
Right,
And
yes.
she got all of the builder versus architect stuff as she was going through uni, which is possibly why she never worked as an architect.
Yeah.
She ended up being a project manager, which probably doesn't endear her any more to you guys.
No, I'd definitely rate project managers definitely above architects.
Right? Engineers?
Engineers are sort of, down with the architects, unfortunately. Like, I think you're an engineer, aren't you, Pete?
No, I did a year of engineering. Once again, I never...
Makes you an engineer, right? Look, it's just that we're the ones that have to do the job,
right.
And I get that they're the ones that have to design it.
Right.
It's a bit like salesmen. I've worked for a lot of large companies and we rely heavily on salesmen.
Right.
And salesmen are out there selling the job, but when they're selling things that we can't actually do.
Right.
And then we turn up on site and the client will say, oh, that lovely salesman, he said you'll do this and you'll do that. I can't do that.
Right.
What
It's not even
planet
physically
is that
possible.
Guy, what planet is that guy on? So, yeah, the architects and the engineers, they just, for want of a better term, they just draw a line on a bit of paper and say, yeah, you can build that. What is it?
Right.
There's definitely leadership and guidelines, I suppose, that we take from architects and engineers because they'll tell us what we can do and what we can't do.
Generally speaking, how do the tradies feel about people outside the trade completely? Not necessarily the people who've gone to uni and are interacting with you, but you're just dealing with other people who do other weird stuff.
Come on, Trent.
Thanks, mate. Thanks.
He's handballed it over.
Well, this is a good one for you because you're partly, you've been to university. So the only time tradies go to university is when they have to fix something.
Well, I mean, if I'm an engineer for doing 1 year of engineering, you've done 3 for at least for a school teacher, 4?
I did. I found it was interesting moving over to the trade. It was interesting the other tradies' perspective or approach.
Right.
Yeah, it did feel. So obviously, I did my trade as a mature age. One of the other guys that I've worked quite closely with in our company also did his trade mature age, but he was working on boats and doing a whole lot of different stuff. Yeah, it was interesting coming in. I think coming from an academic background, there was definitely a bit of a stigma of this guy's an academic. He doesn't really quite fit in here.
Right. Was it just not fit in nicely, or were they just you were a weirdo, or?
I don't know. I've come across a couple different things. I don't know. There's a bit of.
I wouldn't say there's animosity.
No, not animosity. There just seems to be a bit of a distance.
Right.
It seems like, for lack of a better word, a bit of condescension, but not.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So these guys who sit in ivory towers and do their book learn and don't really know how to actually do anything.
Yeah, and like Trent was saying, sort of condescension, but it's almost like a reverse condescension because the tradies will say things like, oh, look at that bloke up there. He thinks he's so good looking down on us. But I suppose it's just that tradies don't understand. Well, a tradie that hasn't been to university thinks that university is just this different world, I suppose, that where you've got to sit down at like a computer or a desk and study. There's sort of a few words that go together that don't go together in a tradies world.
Right.
Sitting down at a desk these days means paperwork.
Right.
Or invoicing.
Yeah.
Or tax work or super.
Which is not for anyone's idea of fun,
No,
really.
not at all.
No.
The Catholic Church used to be a church that was mostly for the workers. Like the majority of Catholics would have been the grassroots people who were doing the hard yards. And we never used to have trouble finding tradies in the Catholic Church. You know, they'd be the ones building the place because they'd be mucking in and getting it done. It seems like we don't have as many of them in the church anymore. Is that a fair comment? That what would you say from the peers and the people you work with? Are there many Christians or Catholics in there?
Oh, I mean, I know Jeremy.
I know
one.
I know Trent.
There we go.
It still only counts as.
I would say in my life of being a tradie, and it's probably sort of 25 years, I could count on both hands how many Catholic tradies I know, and I'd still have fingers left over heaps.
Right. I could do the same.
Right.
Yeah, it's just.
There's not a few. And what about Christians in general? Same deal?
There's a few more Christians.
Yeah.
But when I say Catholics, I don't include Maronites.
Okay.
I don't include Maronites in that, not in a disregard to Maronites. I mean just not Maronites. Simply you go out to a building site out in Greenacre, Lakemba, Bankstown, and it's pretty much split 50-50 down the guts where half of them are Maronites and the other half are not, and you can see it and you definitely gravitate towards the Maronite side, and you just see much more friendly banter with the Maronites.
So that's a particular cultural group, though, where the entire culture is tied up in this. I mean, there's a lot of building and other kinds of people in that range, and they tend to have the Catholic culture goes with that culture, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
It's, one of the reasons I ask is that when someone in our marriage prep area mentioned that they hadn't had any tradies go through the Sydney Archdiocese in about 5 years. It strikes me as that it seems like it's almost a reversal where the trades used to be like not everyone was Catholic, but Catholics were quite strongly represented there, and it wasn't unusual. But what it sounds like you're saying is you'd be a rarity in the tradie world.
I'd certainly say that there's parents out there who are discouraging their children from becoming tradies.
Okay, why would that be?
based on their own experiences of a tradie.
Okay.
Their experiences of a building site, construction sites.
Okay.
Yeah, pornography is rife in the building industry.
Okay.
Construction industry.
And is your impression that that's more so than other workplaces?
Well, I'm not involved in other workplaces, but I know it's certainly rife in ours. And I speak to people about it, and it doesn't seem to be. Look, these days everything is obviously everywhere because of the iPhones.
Right.
But when I was an apprentice, the general construction sites, you'd go to the toilet and there'd be pictures everywhere. Some of them would be hand-drawn. Some of them would be pictures out of magazines.
Right.
You go to the lunchroom, and the lunchroom was just, it was just distractions everywhere. There was just magazines on every table. You'd go to a site box or a shed, and you'd open up the door, and there'd be, centerfolds everywhere, and it was a real struggle. So
this is from a Catholic perspective, where you don't need that kind of temptation and distraction from treating people as the dignified and beautiful people they should be.
Absolutely.
But you're talking about what you're going through the trade school. What about more recently, Trent? Would you say it's still the case?
I haven't found it so much, not to the extent that Jeremy has. I work with just a very small company.
Okay.
Which I think a lot of stuff tends to be more transparent because we're in people's homes. The owners are always on site, so I think it's
not something you don't have those private spaces you're talking about, like the lunchrooms and things like that. Yeah,
but definitely, it's still definitely quite prevalent.
It used to be in the bank when I was in the early 90s in the banking industry. Almost every male toilet block, you'd go inside and there'd be posters of everything all over the place. Wherever there was a space that was just the males.
Think of Die Hard. Everybody remembers Die Hard.
Yes.
When he's running up and down through the lift shafts right on the top of the building, and every time he goes past that poster, he sort of pats it. He says, "Hey, girls, give me a call, we'll have some laughs." And it's that image is sort of him just walking down the corridor and seeing centerfolds.
Yep.
Is something that I remember in the building industry from as long as I can remember.
It used to be that. Now, I'm only looking from outside here, but it used to be that friends who were girls and, people, my peers, used to constantly get heckled and vulgar things called out from building sites. I haven't seen that a lot in the last 10 years. Would you say that's changed a little bit?
He probably is too young to know the change, but...
I was going to say, you obviously haven't walked past many building sites.
Yeah. Look, in some there are differences in building sites. Some building sites are managed quite well, and some building sites are not. So some building sites will really pick up the sort of respect of a person, very much so, and they'll tell you that you can't swear on site, you can't do this, you can't do that. There's no calling out, no fighting. They'll even go so far as to say no drugs on site, and no alcohol. But certainly in my early days, back in the 90s, you didn't walk past a building site.
Right.
It was just a no-go zone.
I got heckled when I walked past the building site, let alone a pretty girl. And I had a beard. I mean, they weren't saying the same things to me, but they were heckling me.
Yep. Yeah. Look, certainly pornography is one thing. There is the conversations is also another thing, but the drugs on site,
right?
Even so far as handing out condoms, like everything was going out of fashion.
Right.
Condoms are a big thing on construction sites.
Right.
The union reps had come on site. You got to be safe. You got to take all the condoms you need, and obviously things have changed. This is sort of.
I thought a safety was a hard hat.
Eye goggles and something else.
Yeah, PPE. Yes. Yeah, no. Admittedly, things have changed, and because things were so bad, I did, when there was an opportunity to sort of run my own business, start my own company, so to speak, I took the opportunity, and it was a struggle for the whole owning a business type of thing and generating certain income. But the beauty of it was that you're in charge of the building site,
right? So
you're in people's homes and you're subject to their rules in their home.
Sure.
But on the building site itself, and by that I mean wherever it was that we were doing the work, that's our site, that's our rules. And because I had a little bit of clout and there were certain things that I didn't allow, it was easier to say, well, here, there's none of this, none of this, none of this. Admittedly, you'd still see blokes in the corner with their phone, looking at the,
Yeah.
But fine, keep it small, keep it to yourself. It's your own time when they're down at lunch, for instance. And that was a big
Is that
thing.
respected? Like if you're in a situation where you have a particular stand on things like this, do you think your peers respect you in that?
I don't know if respect's the right word.
They tolerate it?
So yeah, maybe tolerate it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know whether I guess if I would say accepted, maybe accepted.
Okay.
But yeah, I think even when you were talking about, you know, the rules in different people's houses and stuff, it's again like they'll tolerate. I think those rules are tolerated or accepted that they're rules, but begrudgingly so. I don't think they're really
that's
respected.
the deal for the job, kind of.
Yeah.
Because I know that when in the bank they had to present a much more respectable image, right? But as soon as you got outside of the customer's view, it was possibly one of the least respectable places I've ever worked. Now, that could be just a reflection of those particular branches that I worked in. I don't want to paint every bank worker that way. But for me, that was quite a shocking experience to see how low they could go and how quickly. And what I noticed about that is as soon as I presented a Christian viewpoint, that made me a target.
Target, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I didn't want to cut in. But yeah, I'd say target is a big thing. Even with the current company I'm with, you'll have guys and they'll sort of think it's a joke. They'll sort of pull up an image on their phone and say, hey, Nunes, check this out. And, you know, it's as much as I can, you know, avoid it. And these days I've got there's quite a few good guys in the company and they'll sort of back me up and they'll just say, look, he's different. Who cares? Like, just lay off. He's asked you 1,000 times not to show him not to do it. You know, back off sort of thing. So it's sort of, your sort of good mates will sort of fight the battle for you in a way, even though they've got a completely different.
So the word there is they respect that, even though if they might not agree with you, they respect that that's your stand, you're consistent in it.
Some do. In other instances, you're a target to some people.
Okay.
And it's not, I couldn't even put a percentage on it because there's been some companies where it's like 90% you're a target and other companies where only 10% you're a target, or just one bloke. Just one bloke.
That one bloke. In terms of let's look for some positive things. Give us some anecdotes, some stories of times when it's been interesting that people have realised something about the Catholic faith, or they've come across it for the first time, and you've said something and they've gone, "What? Oh, Catholic! Wow!"
I was driving our young bloke, our apprentice, somewhere. It was not long after Palm Sunday, so I had this palm leaf, and so I got rosary beads hanging on off the mirror, palm leaf on the dash, and he just, "What you got a dead plant in here for, mate?" So it was actually an interesting way to kind of open that conversation up.
Right.
Talk to him about it. Yeah.
Nice. And how did he respond to that?
Yeah, fairly well. Again, like different, very small company, and so I think there's more of an acceptance there. The experience I've had, limited experience that I've had, I found that they're open to it.
Right.
And more accepting.
It's cool.
I feel like it's more of while there's obviously still the crudeness and that's all still very prevalent, but there's almost maybe even an apathy towards the fact that I'm different and I'm Catholic.
Okay.
In a sense that, okay, that's him, whatever, rather than an outright animosity.
Right.
Which is, so I don't know whether you've got that to talk about later, but
anytime you like.
Differences between the industries, in my experience anyway, I've found that, there's more of an openness with the tradies.
Right. So they're much
with regards to Catholicism.
You can be a bit more raw about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Obviously, definitely not for them, and, they disagree with it. And
is that more
whatnot,
because they're more comfortable to disagree with you than perhaps in, say, another profession?
Sorry, how do you mean? Let's
say if you're a teacher, you seem to be comparing that tradies are much more comfortable hearing something they might not agree with, but they're happy to hear it as part of your story. Is that, and you seem to be comparing that to the teaching?
I was corporate before teaching as well, so both. Yeah,
okay,
both
so
teaching
corporate or teaching.
Yeah.
That in those circumstances, they're not quite as comfortable with someone who disagrees.
Yeah,
I got to cut in here.
Go for
it's because there's no girls on site.
All right.
You're going to edit that one out.
All right, no, we can't edit that. That's the most fun we've had all day. So is it?
Look, the building industry is very much a dinosaur industry.
Right.
It is just a blokey bloke industry.
Yeah.
And because of that, you do get the crudeness that you may. I don't know about other industries.
Right.
You get the crudeness that comes with just basically the blokes down at the pub.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can share with them like your experience. Like I'll say grace before I eat something, and we'll go to the shops.
Issue.
And even for some Catholics, that's strange. Like we'll go to the Subway, and I'll sit down and I'll quickly make the sign of the cross, and you get sideways looks. But more looks you get from people that you don't work with than from the people that you do work with.
Right.
Yep.
Now, again, you're going to put a big target on your back saying because there's no girls on site. But I don't know what it is about that, but I'd say it's just that is the coincidence, that the fact that the building industry is just such a dinosaurs, and basically it's like pubs, it's footy.
To your point, it's not leftist or progressive, which a lot of the other industries have become. And so there's not this antagonism towards tradition or Catholicism or anything which you find in other industries, but it's just a bunch of blokes who are, relatively speaking, quite conservative in a lot of their views outside of the church, but they still seem to be quite conservative.
Is it because, and this is just me throwing in from completely outside, is it because in building you're there to stick this board here and do this, and everyone can do that, whatever their beliefs are about other things, right? And if you looked at me a bit cynically then when I said everyone could do it because you're remembering that apprentice. But I'm just saying, in terms of there's a particular job and everyone's doing the same job, and you can say they all come from different backgrounds. We're cool with that. Whereas it's what I found in the corporate sector, not just in the bank but in other things, they tended to take a statement of belief as a personal challenge or an insult. Like, you're saying I'm not as good as you. You're saying you're better than me, or that my work here has to be governed by your principles, kind of thing.
You tend to find less snowflakes in the tradie industry. Is that what you're trying to say?
No, I didn't mean that, but I'm glad you said it. What do you mean by snowflakes in that?
There's a dad.
Everyone's looking at me. Is that one of the?
There's a dad.
PC, you can't say that word.
No, I love
I'm a tradie.
Where we go to mass in our community, there's a dad, and he'll, like, if someone is upset, like when I say someone, if one of his kids is upset, he'll just, sort of bark out. He'll sort of look at me with a sideways look and he'll say, "Nunesy, Spartans, not snowflakes."
Spartans, not snowflakes. Oh dear! So I don't have to do that in our house because my wife does it for me. She just goes, "Yeah, what?" When the kids come in and just crying, "What? Really? Are you bleeding? Go on."
That's right. Yep.
Anyway, I guess I meant that, and now I'm realising the stupidity of my question, because I know, Nunesy, you've already shared with me situations where honesty was an issue in the workplace, and that became a little bit of tension between you and other work. So.
Yeah. I'm struggling to remember what it is that we were discussing.
It's probably better if we don't go into specific details, but there was the case of where your salesman, your people were saying, right, I'll be there at this time. And most people, it's almost a byword about tradies that they say we'll get it done by this time, and they almost never turn up. And you as a Catholic were trying to be honest with the client.
What you were talking about before about turning up, that one there is more common when you're working for a company that's got like a sales team selling you, and will turn up and the client will say, "Oh, how are your children? Are they okay?" You start to look into the distance and you say, just before you say, "Yes, my children are fine, why do you ask?" you realise that the supervisor may have told them that you are sick or your kids have been sick, when clearly they haven't.
Right.
And you say, "Oh, yes, the kids are very well, thank you, they're all recovering." And
which is true, but
they weren't sick. The reason why you weren't there isn't because your kids were sick. The reason why you weren't there is because the boss prioritised you on another job.
Right.
And you've got to be careful not to throw your boss under the bus, but at the same time, you can't lie for people. There's a very fine line. I remember in that movie, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, when one of the animals gets caught and they say, "Where did they go?" And it's like that Morgan, the wolf guy. And then whoever it was that was caught said they went north, and the children were directly above him in the tree. And so, of course, the wolves all ran off, and it was a beautiful moment where I highlighted to the kids, see, you don't lie. You don't need to lie about it. But,
That's where mental reservations come in.
Yeah. Certainly being creative about where you've been is certainly a skill that I've learnt.
Right. What about you, Trent? Any stories about where the Catholic faith has changed the way you would be a tradie, and that's had an impact on other tradies?
The honesty thing, I think, is, I'd have to agree. That seems to be a big deal. There's a lot of pressure on people to, be there all the time and do the right thing and get everything done, and the truth tends to get bent an awful lot.
Okay. Surely it would be, if you were a tradie who had a reputation for being true to your word, and that if you said you were going to show up, you did show up, surely that would be something I'm being naive here because you're both looking at me like I've grown another head. Would that enhance your reputation as a tradie?
In some instances, I'd say it would, but only if that person had any inclination towards the Catholic faith.
Right.
If they didn't, and I'm not saying
There'd be people who weren't Catholics who value honesty, though, surely.
Yeah, but I'm not saying that it's only Catholics that value honesty, but
right.
It's certainly in business, certainly the businesses that I've been involved in. I've had a few good Catholic bosses, but again, they're few and far between. But there's the vast majority is, I even had one guy, he basically sacked me. I was a subby, but he basically sacked me. I'd given him 6 months' notice that my wife was about to have a baby and she could have a baby at any time from this moment to this moment because the last one was born 3 weeks early.
Righto.
So when the next one actually came 5 weeks early, don't worry about the stress on the parents or any of that. But I called up my supervisor on the Saturday at about 6 o'clock in the morning and said, look, my wife's gone into labour. I can't get this job done.
Yep.
Later on that day at about 11 o'clock, he called me and Catherine had the baby and he told me how disappointed he was that I'd let him down because I had to go and help be the support person for my wife and help her have a baby.
Right.
Yeah, so I lost a job over that.
Wow. So it sounds like you guys you're clearly not a majority in the crowd, in the tradie crowd. We seem to be losing that trade. Like the blue collar workers aren't turning up at mass. Would you say that's a fair assessment? So let's talk about the importance of having Catholic mates then. If it's a blokey, everyone wants to be blokey, but if there's already a kind of a blokey sort of camaraderie going there, how important it is to have Catholic men around you?
Yeah, definitely, absolutely.
What would you say is important about that? Why is it important?
Well, I think we're made for that fraternity. We need that. We need that fraternity as men.
Right.
But I think having good Catholic mates to be able to rely on when you really need them. Yeah,
certainly I'd have to agree with that. There's certain things that you can talk about with the guys at work, just about your struggles. Every dad, husband struggles, right?
Yep.
And you can certainly talk about it with the guys at work. And like I said, there's not many Catholics at work, and you can talk about the struggles of being, married and having kids. And somewhere along the line, someone will sort of relate, and you can have a genuine conversation. But your conversations with some people seem to be, oh yeah, that's it. Yeah, you should get rid of it, mate. Yeah, just leave. Leave, yeah. So certainly having Catholics,
the advice and the support's
dads,
shallow.
Yeah. Well, you've got to obviously pick your audience. You don't go up to a few guys at site who are busy on their phones, swiping or whatever it is that the young people do these days, because they'll just say, don't worry about it, it's too much effort or it's too hard. Yeah, just leave, mate, just leave. So you get that advice a lot. So yeah, certainly having good priests, good confessors, but good Catholic mates who are dads as well. Like a Catholic mate would be like, that'd be a dream, but to have guys who are Catholics as well as dads and your kids are friendly, your kids know each other, but it just makes things so much better that you can communicate to someone who has an idea about your child. Yeah, but has an idea about your child. I'm struggling with this child or struggling with Catherine, or Catherine's struggling with me with this, or I'm being a real, not a nice person here. But the guys will tell you, oh, maybe you should, pick it up a bit here and, you left your socks up here.
Yep. So full disclosure to the listener, we, as I mentioned at the start of the show, we have all hung out in a bunch of men who more or less get together for a meal and then a movie occasionally. We used to do a lot more until my youngest boy came along and I stopped organising them. And that was really valuable for all people. It wasn't, there was a couple of tradies there, but were people from all the different professions. What I valued from it was that you guys were there and other people were there from totally different workplaces and totally different backgrounds. It was a really good mix across the spectrum, and our faith was what brought us together. But we didn't do much talking about our faith. We just talked, if I can say, talk crap most of the time.
But that's, like you say, that's the importance of it, because I find when I go out with someone when I say go out, I might go to the football or go to the pub to watch a fight or something where you go with other blokes, the talking crap that you do with them
is very different.
Yeah, like what you'd experience at work, right?
Just again, in sense of the crudeness of it, or the shallow advice, or the lack of depth to the conversation, or yeah, is that what you're trying to?
Yeah, just it's not family, it's not family based.
Yeah.
There's no commitment is a word that you just don't hear.
Right.
Like commitment is, well, you know what? Like they'll joke about it. I'm going to commit to eating 2 Big Macs today, and you're like, mate, you're a legend. Seriously, like, good on you.
I want to be you when I grow up.
So it's just a struggle, and it's not that they don't have kids and that they don't have a missus, but it's just that what they want to talk about or what they struggle with, mate, the
conversation is very banal.
People talking in banal language and having vacuous conversations isn't limited to tradies. You can go to universities and get the same thing. Believe me, you can. You can go any building in the CBD here and you'll get the same kind of water cooler talk. It's reasonably rare to find people who have some sort of substance to their conversations and their advice too. Partially because we're a bit scared to commit ourselves to offering specific advice that's based on moral principles, but mostly because people just aren't that interested in being deep in this sense anymore. We seem to be really crap at attracting tradies, or at least being a place where tradies could feel at home in the church. Can you give us some insights or perhaps your own reflection on that? Why is it that you think we wouldn't be attractive in that sense?
It's attractive to me.
I enjoy it.
Good stuff.
It's very attractive to me. I don't understand, but look, it's not a coincidence that I'm a cradle Catholic. I don't think I'd get here if I wasn't brought up.
Can I just throw a bit of a hand grenade into this and say,
you're going to do it anyway.
You guys and I
seems to be the topic of the day.
Shouldn't have been tradie. Should have been hand grenade.
How many hand grenades can you throw in one conversation?
You guys don't go to a parish that is your average suburban wishy-washy.
Wasn't expecting that hand grenade.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go into the details of the parish because we're not going to try to advertise anything particular, but I'm just saying, if you stepped into the parishes that I go to a different parish, but if we went into either one of ours, you wouldn't have any doubt you're in a Catholic church. Like, it's okay, we're in Captain Catholic territory here, right? Would you feel the same attraction, or would tradies feel the same attraction to your average suburban parish where people are just trying to be nice and there's a kind of the 70s band they're going, and you know what I mean? Sorry, I'm setting Jeremy off now. You can be honest, Jeremy. We can edit it out if it's bad later.
I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. I haven't been going to our church for all that long.
Right.
It's probably only been about 7 years. So before that, I was just in Captain Catholic Church.
There's been a suggestion to me, because my area is studying masculinity in the Catholic Church, right? But I'm still very much, like, I've been in various things like counselling, and very short story, but my counselling involved people with very serious problems stopping them from being employed. Mm-hmm. And that usually meant jail time, apprehended violence orders, drug things, problems, etc. like that. So I had truckies, prostitutes, criminals, hardcore people coming all the time, and they would talk about the suburban parishes as being, in their words, I can't actually repeat here, but their words were that they were basically no guts in them. There was no substance. That they got there and there were a whole bunch of people talking about their feelings, and they didn't feel like there was anything to be attracted to. And occasionally said, look, I went to the cathedral and that looked like a church. You know, if I was going to see God, I'd go and look in a place that looks like a church. Now, I don't know. I mean, you don't always find the best thing in the cathedral. I'm just saying that there seems to be something that sometimes the church presents itself, this is us, no apologies. Not rudely, just clear. And if someone comes looking for that, they'll find it. And I have seen some of them respect that. They might not like it, but they go, yeah, you're doing your thing. Whereas if someone's trying to be super user-friendly and modern and all that sort of thing, it doesn't tend to appeal to people who are straight shooters.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Like your tradies. You'd agree with that?
Yeah. Because they seem to be no-nonsense kind of guys. And so the kind of happy-clappy, fluffy-duffy let's all hold hands and
He
sing
said happy
Kumbaya.
clappy.
Oh, mate.
Go on.
Look, Peter threw the grenade. Like, I'm just...
You're just diving on it.
You know, I take no responsibility for what happens now that Peter's done it, all right? It's all on him. That's it.
So,
honestly, though, because they are straight shooters, no nonsense, the sort of watered-down Catholicism is not appealing to people that are like that, I don't think.
You hear the truth from the pulpit.
Right.
Yep.
Feelings don't come into it.
I was at another place where someone was reacting to a kind of happy clappy style of thing, and it wasn't about the worship style. He just literally said to me straight, and I think he was a straight shooter, and he just said, "These guys are trying to make me have an emotion, and I'll run from that." He just said it straight out.
Yeah.
Okay, but I know you're an emotional person. He goes, yeah, but when it's my call. Yes, if you're trying to make it about my emotions and you're trying to manipulate that, don't want to know. Just tell me what you're going to tell me and I'll decide whether to be emotional about it, all right?
Yeah.
It was an interesting exchange.
Yeah.
To your point, and to the point of masculinity, and these guys tend to be, in general, and they've got their faults and their flaws and they take things to a fault, but in general they're fairly straight and no-nonsense kind of guys. I think it's inherent in our nature that we are drawn to truth, and particularly people of that disposition that don't want to cop any nonsense from the world and tend to be relatively conservative in those kind of situations. I think a faith that is traditional and more virile and has truths that are unashamedly promoted, I think that's more attractive.
Or even if they don't like it, at least they respect it.
Even if they don't like it. Yeah.
Yeah, I watched one priest one day talk to about a room full of about 60 young kids. And they were young kids, they were young adults. And he spent about 20 minutes saying to them, just convincing them it was okay to disagree with him. And one of them eventually put their hand up and said, "Father, we're fine disagreeing with you, all right?" Just going to put it out there. But can you tell us what you think so that we can decide whether to disagree with you? So we're just, what's going on there? So, straight shooting. What do you think would make a Catholic church, a particular Catholic parish, more open to or attractive to a tradie?
I'd have to say families.
Right.
I'd have to say families because, I mean, that's my life. That's me. Right. I don't know about other tradies. To a young bloke, I would say truth and zero emotions, in that I don't care about what you feel. Sorry. It's basically, I suppose it's my sticking point.
Now, there's nothing against I've seen tradies get emotional, but it's the attempt to make it happen in a particular way or time or place.
I just don't think that emotions should come into it in that regard. When you're talking about, I mean, I get it. There's faith and there's reason, and you need to be able to think your way through stuff. But thinking your way through stuff doesn't mean if it, tugs at your heartstrings and you go, oh yeah, I feel, I got a flutter in my heart. Oh, that must mean it's right. That must mean it's true. You hear the truth, but you've got to be in tune to it. See, I suppose going back, I took a few of the kids to hear a talk recently, and I know that he's not everybody's cup of tea, Tim Staples, and he's got these great one-liners that he keeps chucking out, and he's American and his accent is quite awkward and hard to listen to. I get that too, but he'll say things like, "Sin makes you stupid," and he's sort of got this, his voice isn't the easiest to listen to as well, but some of the things he says, they're not always accurate, but still some of the things he says is sin makes you stupid. So if you're in tune, if you've got a heart that's full of grace, if you're receiving the sacraments, you'll hear the truth and you'll know it.
And you'll like it.
And you will like it. You will be drawn to it. It's not going to be the easiest thing for you to do in life, like Lent. It's not the easiest thing, but you just know that it is good for you, and a little bit of sacrifice. Yep. It's the hard yards, and you're doing it for the good of your family, for the good of your wife, for the good of the kids, for the good of the church, for the good of your
The world.
For the world, you can keep it selfish and just keep it for your own family members, who have died and gone, and you're trying to get them to heaven.
Yep.
When people, here we go, another hand grenade. When people will say, "I know they're in heaven. I just know they're in heaven," and you think, how can you know? What
you're saying is that I want them to be there, really, a lot, which is legitimate.
You live in hope.
All right, I'm going to throw back the emotional thing at you because we got to throw it out. I was, and still am to some extent, extraordinarily angry with God about my son being born with Down syndrome and with lots of physical problems. And he had to have operations, and he's still got other problems. Right? I was pretty angry, very angry at the time, and still occasionally now. Right? That's a very strong emotion. Now, it would be. And that's also, anger is also an emotion I come across a lot with people who are straight shooters. It comes at you hard. Like if someone's really hurt, especially the tradie friends I have, got a few others. They tend.
To say it's just us.
No.
We're angry people, Jeremy.
You're the Catholic tradies, I know. But it tends to come hard, right? But that's not disengaged from our faith. And I'm not contradicting your point. I'm just trying to add a side thing to it. But what I'm saying is my emotion doesn't provide the answers. So I might come to God and say, what's the deal here? And I'll get some answers, and I have an emotional reaction to that, either anger or later peace, etc. The emotions are real, and they're part of me, and that's real too. And sometimes being open about emotions with people, that they're okay and that stuff happens like that is okay, so long as we're not looking to those emotions to provide us with the answers, as if the emotions themselves are the answer. Is that fair to say? And
yeah.
So because, I get pretty emotional at the Eucharist because it's amazing in terms of what's going on there.
Yeah.
But it's an emotion in reaction to what is objectively true. It's not the Eucharist, or it's not special because I feel so wonderful about it. I feel so wonderful about it because it's amazing.
Right.
Is that?
Yes, absolutely.
Cool.
You put my words, eloquently.
I thought that was what you were trying to say.
No, I totally agree with that.
Coming from a tradie, though, that was probably an insult. You're so eloquent.
Yeah. Like I said before, there's a lot of words. I don't know what they mean. And I just got to call it out. What does that mean again?
And yet when I want something really grounded where I'm trying to say to them, am I really just losing the plot? You're one of the guys I'll come and talk to.
Yeah.
Because you absolutely, in terms of wisdom, absolutely on the money. That's a good thing. There you go. So in terms of being attractive, shoot straight, basically. Shoot straight and we'd probably get more stuff built, wouldn't we? If we had tradies around electricians and things. That's probably as much as we've got time for today. Thanks, guys, for coming on. Thanks, all of you, for listening. That's it for this week's podcast. If today's discussion got you thinking or arguing with your podcast device, or if you're a tradie who has a dispute with these young gentlemen, feel free to let us know. You can subscribe to the podcast at thiscatholiclife.com.au. Tell us what you want us to discuss, or tell us what you think we got wrong at info@thiscatholiclife.com.au, or Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Discord, or all the usual social media. Remember, this is a uniquely Australian Catholic podcast, and we think that's an idea worth getting behind, so tell your friends. Jeremy, it's time for a shout-out. Perhaps we'll leave out those Sparkies.
Yeah, the Sparkies and the plumbers, yeah. Yes. My shout-out's to my lovely wife, long-suffering.
Long-suffering.
We're 20 years this year.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Trent?
My wife also, and my young daughter.
Right, lovely. And I think I will shout out to the tradies who've come to our house, been slightly shocked at how many people are in the house and still fix things. And I love the fact that they asked the blunt questions, which everyone else seemed to want to ask, but they never did. And the tradies will ask you pretty blunt questions, and you tend to have, or I tend to have, much more deep and honest questions and answers, like great conversations with the non-Christian tradies that I have with other people who are supposedly good at talking about these things. That's all for now. Thank you for listening to This Catholic Life.